This episode of Fantastic People is sponsored by Kinetic Realty Services. Kinetic Realty Services exists to help you find home. Their agents understand that home is more than an address. Home is where life happens. It's a place where we experience joy and pain. It's a place where we make memories and build community. Their agents see more than a transaction or a file number. They see the person or family that home represents. Kinetic Realty Services executive sales agents manage the home buying or selling process with care. Kinetic Realty Services strives to provide timely communication, technical excellence, and tailored information for each customer and each home, making sure that from search to close, your home transaction is joyful and professional. Start your home buying or selling process today at kineticrs.com/info. Again, that's kineticrs.com/info. Licensed in Florida and Alabama, Kinetic Realty Services, helping real estate investors find success and helping individuals and families find home.
Welcome back to Fantastic People. I'm Christian.
And I'm Regan, and here with us today is a very special guest all the way from Pensacola, Florida, is Joseph Ricketts. Joseph is currently working on his master's in biology at the University of West Florida and is also a herpetology field technician with the National Park Service. Joseph, how you doing?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you.
Yeah, appreciate you hanging out, man. I'm excited to talk with you today because we'll get to it in a little bit, but the topic we're discussing is so different than anything we've done before.
Very much. That's a good thing. We like that.
Yeah, I appreciate the exotic nature of it.
Yeah. I'm glad I can provide that.
Awesome. So, Joseph, working on your master's in biology, did you also do, at University of West Florida here in Pensacola, did you also do your bachelor's there? Or
No, I actually went to Covenant College. It's a small school, kind of in the northwest corner of Georgia on Lookout Mountain. And I got my undergrad in biology with an environmental concentration.
Cool. That's awesome. I love Covenant College. Never went there as a student. Always went as a camper, student life camps. But it's a beautiful place just to be up there on that mountain.
There's a lot of outdoors opportunities up there.
Yeah, lots of cool stuff.
It's awesome.
I just like Pine Mountain. Just in general, that whole area is really nice. And,
it is.
I mean, North Georgia in general is close to home for me, so I love that area. I'm from Atlanta originally. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah, I used to go camping up there that way all the time.
Yeah, and so you're from Columbiana.
Yeah, originally from Columbiana, Alabama.
Okay.
Sounds like a small town. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I've never heard of it either.
It's like 45 minutes south of Birmingham, hour north of Montgomery. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't even sure I was saying it right, to be honest with you. I was like, I hope I get this right.
When you look at that word, you just think of the most Alabama way to pronounce it, and that's the correct way to say it.
Yeah, it is.
I think I did it right. Yeah. But yeah, so, okay, first of all, what's that like? Columbiana to Covenant College to Pensacola, it's kind of all over the southeast there.
Kind of been bouncing around a bit. So actually after college, I went to North Carolina and worked as an environmental educator and advisor at a camp up there. So I taught kind of all ages about the local ecology and botany, and got to show different organisms to the kids. It was really a good experience. I learned a whole lot. Also learned a lot about dealing with large organizations and moving them towards sustainable practices, and that can be really difficult sometimes. I was a little in over my head at different points, but it was a good experience for me. And then we ended up moving to Gainesville, where I worked for the National Science Foundation on the National Ecological Observatory Network. I was a field ecologist for them. And then from there, we moved back to Pensacola, where I'm working on my master's now.
Cool. And so working on your master's, I guess, do you have is that research focused? You have to do that for the degree, or you're just doing it at the same time? What's that like?
Yeah. So my thesis project is where my research is focused on. And originally it's supposed to be focused on, the process of venom synthesis and the banded sea crate and the metabolic cost of that process.
Those are some fancy words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can try and break it down. Basically,
we went to school this episode, everybody.
So basically, venom is thought to be a costly material to produce for organisms. So the idea is that it takes a lot of energy to produce it. So the biological driving force for conserving venom, so why a snake might not inject all of its venom when it bites someone, would be because it's expensive and they need to conserve that energy. And there's some kind of conflicting information in the literature on that. So the species I'd be looking at is highly venomous, but is known for being very reluctant to bite people. And when it does, it rarely injects venom. They're often dry bites. So the thinking is they're highly venomous. It's really expensive to make the venom, so they hold back, but not totally sure. So, but due to COVID, that might not happen. So I might not get to go. I would be going to Indonesia for that research, but I might not be going for that. So we'll see.
Yeah, certainly COVID is though almost every person we talk to can
Yeah.
give a story about how COVID has thrown a curveball to what they have going on. I mean, that's super interesting, I'll be honest. And I consider myself a smart guy, but I'm not necessarily smart at this subject. Wasn't even aware dry bite was a thing that could happen.
Yep.
Anytime I've heard of a venomous, well, even specifically within snakes, like
Yeah. They're actually much more common than people think.
yeah, that gives
I mean,
me a
don't go
little bit
messing
of
with them,
reprieve.
but-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe, and I may be wrong about this, Georgia has every type of poisonous snake in North America can be found in the state of Georgia. And
That's not actually true. Sorry.
is that really?
No. There's a lot of different, I mean, they've got like rattlesnakes, but they don't have like every individual
Yeah,
species.
yeah.
But yeah. They've got the main types though, for sure.
Is growing up, it was very, very big. Watch out for poisonous
Yeah.
snakes in the growing up there, because
Sounds like
a lot
that
of
sounds terrifying. Like just
like, I mean, here
yeah.
you hear about like aquatic wildlife that could be a danger, or like a riptide or something like
Yeah.
that, like things you need to be cautious of. But growing up there, it was, hey, there's a lot of venomous snakes out there, so watch out for that.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen one ever.
Oh, really?
I mean, maybe, and I just didn't know it. I mean, I'm pretty quick.
Oh, I've been pretty close to some rattlesnakes.
We had a
Never seen a rattlesnake.
really large population
Alive.
of cottonmouths that lived in a creek near my house in Alabama, and I like discovered it and was pretty scared at first, but then just kind of like spent a lot of time observing them, and it was super cool. I could be like 5 feet away from them and they'd just sit there and watch me.
Yeah, I've seen rat snakes. That's about it.
Yeah.
And if I did, I didn't know it. I didn't know to be, cautious. I just pretty much grabbed the shovel quickly and killed it. So,
Reagan.
yeah, I know you probably don't want to hear that, but I mean, I wasn't going to play around and stare and take a picture and see if I could figure out whether or not it was poisonous or not. I was just going to go.
I will pick up a shovel, but then I put the snake on the shovel and I just move it.
See, because then it just comes back.
Actually, killing a snake increases your chances of getting bitten significantly.
Are there other snakes around watching what you do?
No, but because of the interaction that like process involves, there's a lot of research and the stats show that your like percentage of getting
you're
bitten goes way
aggravating
up
them.
because you're aggravating them, and you have to be relatively close to them in order to do that.
Yeah. Well, okay. You know what? I probably did see one time. Okay. I was walking around in the back fields of our church, and I was like doing some prayer walking and just like to myself, time to myself. And I was dumb enough. My eyes were closed, and I'm walking around in the woods. And at one point I stopped and I opened up my eyes, and I mean, probably less than a foot in front of me was, and it was like its head was up. Like I don't know if that means anything, but he was looking at me, waiting to see what I was doing for sure.
I have one that lives in my front like flower bed. I've never moved it. He will come out and sunbathe like
Oh, it's good to know.
on my sidewalk.
Thanks.
And
Nice.
Didn't know that.
Yep. I don't really let my kids play in the front yard because I know the
Yeah.
snake is out there.
Well, we've been
but-
out there a lot.
Yeah, but I don't. He's never.
Do you know what kind that one is? Is it a
I
rat
don't.
snake?
Probably a rat.
If you
Snake.
send me a picture, I love identifying snakes. So
Yeah, next time he's out. I mean,
shoot me a picture whenever.
normally in the spring is when I
Okay.
see him out. But if I do, I'll
And if you need one moved, I can do that too.
I totally got sidetracked. So you got snakes.
Talking about snakes, yeah. I don't know.
When do you anticipate you'll be done, or is it kind of with the topic up in the air that could delay you for a while?
So that could delay me. Normally they aim to have us done in 2 to 2.5 years, and I would like to finish around then because I'm not sure if I'm going to go right into a PhD program. UWF doesn't offer that, but I'd be looking at Florida for that. University of Florida. For that.
Do you want to like teach long term?
Not teach.
What would you like to do with it?
I think research or working potentially for FWC as like a biologist. I know that a lot of times PhD means you get to do a lot of paperwork, but I really do love being outside. So anything that affords me that opportunity, I'd be interested in. But I don't think I'm TAing right now for several labs, and it's just not quite my jam. But
my brother's TAing in economics right now, and he loves it.
That's awesome. That's great. We need people like that.
Yeah, well, no offense to him, but when you get an economics degree, what else are you going to really do?
Yeah.
Teach economics. No, that's awesome. I'm, highly appreciative of people who have the drive and commitment. I have a bachelor's degree, and I love going to school, but I don't think I have the drive in me at 32 years old now to keep going. And but mad respect for people who do.
It's got its ups and its downs for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and definitely certain fields benefit more out of it.
Yeah,
The more you can study, the more you can learn in your field. I mean, that makes sense
and
for you.
My field in particular, you kind of need to progress in academically before you can get into other employment opportunities.
Well, and I feel like too, I mean, if you're out in the field, you need to know what's going on, right?
Right.
The more you know about it, the safer you'll be, the more successful you'll be.
Right.
Because there's plenty of people that have gone on to study this stuff in far greater detail than you've had a chance to experience yet, right? So, or ever would, probably.
Well, we've kind of been beating around the bush anyway, because we've been talking about snakes and, your degree being in it. But what are you a fan of officially?
So I'm a huge fan of wildlife, obviously. And through that, I've become a big fan of wildlife photography. And not just regular wildlife photography, but also aquatic wildlife photography. So
how did that desire or skill or want to pursue that kind of come about?
So the first time I was really exposed to wildlife photography, I was on a trip out west with my family. We were in Yellowstone National Park, and if you've ever been to any of the national parks out west, there's small mammals everywhere. And sadly, it's because people feed them, so they kind of tend to get pretty close to people. But there's a species of ground squirrel there called the Uinta ground squirrel, and I was so excited that I could get close-up shots of them, so I took a ton of photos with my dad's new camera, and I loved it. So from then on, my dad got me a camera for Christmas sometime, and I grew out of that one and upgraded to another one, and then from then on was kind of on my own and upgraded on my own, and it's just kind of progressed from there.
Yeah, photography is one of those hobbies / addictions that there's always a bigger, better thing.
It's tough. Yeah. You gotta aim it right so that you can land in a spot that you can use that equipment for a long time before having an upgrade, because it is unfortunately very expensive.
My wife and I bought a camera for her, totally like for a professional thing, last year, and didn't even really spend that much money on it. Like we spent several $100s, but when you compare the price that cameras can get to, I feel like we made out all right. But between lighting equipment and cameras, and then it's for her cake business, so we had a nice background made, and all of a sudden you're a G in the hole, and you're by this point everything's already established. You're oh, here's another camera that I could have done this much. It's like computers, by the time you buy one, the next best thing is already out there.
It's so annoying.
It's tough. It's one of those things where I feel like I could get into it, but I don't want to take the price tag on of photography. But wildlife photography, I think, is, in my opinion, my personal favorite of that, like artistic video.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. I took a photography class in high school as an elective. And
I didn't even know we offered photography.
We did. It was like, I think it took all the way to photography 4. It could be a possibility.
And I was in band. All of my electives were band.
Yeah, well, so I did drama, and there was one year, I think it was my senior year, where I decided I was like, I'm not going to get much more out of this class. No offense, Mr. Tooley, if you're out there listening. He wasn't happy with me quitting because he wanted me to keep going. But I was like, you know what, it's my senior year. Like, let me do something else. I've done this literally every single year. And one of those semesters, I took a Bible class that was offered at a public school. And then
Mr. Gilmore.
Yeah. And then
shout out Mr. Gilmore.
Yep, that's good. That's a good class. Anyway, had the opportunity to take some other electives after that, so I decided to do photography, which is really cool. It was a really cool experience. I loved it. And yeah, to the same point, like taking still life or photography of just out there in nature and wildlife and scenery, like that's what I had fun doing.
Yeah.
Even just for that semester or two that I took the class. So.
What are some of the challenges that, like, aquatic photography you have faced that are maybe different than, something else?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first basic one is...
You're underwater.
Well, yeah. But even before that is, like, having to have the right equipment.
Yeah.
So, when it started out, in college, my friends and I were all super outdoorsy. So, when most people were going to the beach to party and everything, we were like, hey, where's some cool place in Florida that we can go to and explore? So we kind of stumbled across Florida Springs, and we're like, what? There's like super clear water that you can snorkel in and see wildlife? That's awesome. So we all had GoPros back then. And so we took our GoPros and we took some shots, but I was never totally satisfied with what I came back with. I mean, that was a few years ago back, and I mean, they've come out with like twice as many GoPros since then. So it was a pretty basic model. But so the first thing was needing the equipment. And I'd kind of looked a little bit and known that they were super expensive, but I just started kind of casually looking on Facebook Marketplace, and I would get the radius of the search. I found a way that you could like type into the URL to make it like 2,000 kilometers instead of like the normal max of like 100 kilometers. And I found one in Dallas, Texas. I had to do a ton of other research like on the specific dimensions of my camera, and the one that I found was actually designed for a 2003 camera body. So it was like 18 years old, even older now. But so I was like, took a risk, and I was like, I think this will work. It was really not that expensive considering how much they can be, because I mean, a full rig could be $5,000 without the camera. But I got it for like a tenth of that price. And then was able to get I have it's like an entry level professional camera. I mean, it's definitely up there. It's full frame, but I was able to get that in the water, and that was kind of the beginning of that. But then you get in the challenges of like, okay, now I'm underwater, having to manipulate all the settings, control lighting and everything, and interact with wildlife while in water, which is different than on land. So
for sure.
Yeah.
The only experience I have anywhere close to this is I took a GoPro.
Yep.
To what is Vortex Springs. And
my nemesis of a spring.
There's like one part where the spring is, where people will like scuba dive. That's real deep, and they have some like large fish. I think it's a species of catfish or something in there, and but that was it. You did some snorkel in there, and, but it just seems like kind of seems like a daunting task based on what we're talking about, but also got to be incredibly rewarding. I mean, what are some of your favorite things that you've shot or at least seen?
So definitely my favorite have been Florida manatees. I've gotten to go to several places, and photograph them. One of the notable ones that everyone knows about is Crystal River, and that was kind of my first experience with my rig. They're so incredible animals. They're so gentle, but they're so huge. And yeah, being able to capture kind of professional level, like photos of those animals was really, really exciting.
Do you have any goals or whatever with your photography? Is that something that you would want to pursue more so, or?
Yeah, I think this is true for a lot of scientists, is they just do photography on the side because their work takes them to some pretty cool places. And I kind of see that for me. I really love it and would like to kind of build it as a business a little bit.
Establish a portfolio.
Yeah. And selling prints, being able to do assignments for wildlife magazines and things like that. But it takes a while to get there, especially because the genre is pretty flooded right now. But which is good, and in a lot of ways makes it challenging in other ways. But so slowly getting there. But I think at the same time, that's not my ultimate goal.
Yeah,
I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And my ultimate goal is to be able to help show other people the beauty of the world and that it's worth protecting, and to teach others about conservation and ways that they can get involved in it.
Yeah. What would you say, in terms of underwater photography and things like that? What is your favorite thing about it? Absolute favorite thing.
I think one thing that I realized as I've gone on increasing ventures out, photographing in Florida Springs and other aquatic places, is just realizing there's a lot of important conservation storytelling to be done there, and particularly in Florida Springs. I think that, and really what happened was on one of our spring break trips in college, we went to a spring in Ocala National Forest. It was awesome. It was the first time being there. But then I went back with my wife and a friend 3 years later, and the difference was really shocking. There was just a lot of aquatic vegetation that was just gone. And this is a pretty big spring, so it sees a lot of traffic. But just to see there have been eelgrass all over the bottom, and then now it's just gone. It's just open sand, and that's a lot of that's because of people just kind of trampling on it, and just that spring getting overwhelmed. And I think it's also interesting with kind of the rise of social media. A lot of these places that were hidden are a little more easily exposed. So I tend to be, unless I consider a spring to have adequate infrastructure to accommodate guests, I tend to not post locations on my photos or
That's a good point.
Not be too open about locations unless I can actually go there with someone to kind of introduce them to it. Because the goal is you want the people that come to be able to have done some research, and through that be able to come across some materials that might have some information regarding this is how you can protect the spring while you're there.
Wow, I never thought of that.
Be careful not to step on these plants, and kind of introduce them to some basic struggles that springs face currently. So and kind of realizing hey, I can play a part of that, and I might have a small audience right now. Maybe it'll be bigger one day. Who knows? But
Right.
I can tell that story, and that's super cool.
Well,
This is a weight of responsibility.
Yeah.
Type thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I would think too that part of taking those kind of photos is showing the wonders of the world to people so that they don't have to go, or because they can't go, or maybe they can't be responsible in conservation and not damaging what's there. So it's helping them get to see and experience those things without bringing all of the people to it.
Yeah.
That's cool. I never thought about that before. Every time I see a picture, I'm like, oh, I want to go there. So to your point, to not say where you are is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. And that makes me think too. I don't know if you've ever been on any cruises or anything like that, but one time I went on a cruise, and a lot of the excursion options are always like snorkeling and like going to see like this aquatic life, and I always felt like those were kind of a letdown. But there was one time I went, it was like they sunk a bunch of stuff, and there's like fish and things around it. What kind of impact does that stuff have on like natural aquatic life, or is that stuff natural in any way? How does that affect, or how does even the cruises going to those things, does that create a footprint that actually does damage?
So I can't speak for like what they sank. I'm not sure about that. I know there are a lot of like artificial man-made reefs that, and that's a huge thing. That's actually really helpful.
We have the Oriskany right off the coast here.
Yeah. I was actually out there yesterday.
Oh, cool.
It was like a plane. It looked like a downed plane, honestly.
Okay,
right?
yeah. So, I mean, that can be a good thing. I think sometimes they might just sink something in the ocean for scuba divers, which is not necessarily bad. I hope that the plane didn't have any like fuel or chemicals in it or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, I mean, it's a tricky balance because ecotourism is a huge thing. And for, I know for some of the countries that the cruise ships may go to, like it's a huge thing for them. I don't know if they see any of the money from the cruise ships, but, and I think like the goal of like conservation, I think sometimes people get frustrated and confused about it. And I think they feel like sometimes that scientists want to just like lock off the natural world from humanity because like they just want to protect it at all costs and not let people interact with it. And I don't think that's the real goal. There might be some people that want that, and there definitely are some times where that's absolutely necessary because people will destroy it.
Right.
And sometimes we have to deal with those consequences by not letting ourselves in those areas to protect them. But the goal is to live in harmony with like nature.
Finding the balance.
Yeah, and finding the balance. And I think, I mean, that's like an essence of ecology, is that like our health and well-being is directly connected to the natural world. And so I think it's good for people to like be able to experience that, and like that gives them a chance to fall in love with wildlife, and have those experiences and be like, that's something I want my kids be able to experience, and like their kids be able to experience, and like something to preserve throughout like all generations on the earth.
Yeah.
So
it's like we were obviously, we had this kind of similar conversation before we started talking about zoos. Like, I think the real answer to like a question like that is trying to just being honest about the pros and cons of it, and can we find a better way to accomplish the same goal?
Right.
Maybe it is the best way. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that I think we have to be honest. Again, going back to the zoo topic, like in a lot of ways, for a young child experiencing wildlife for the first time and them learning about conservation is a good thing. It can help, inspire people to do more than we've done, and we haven't done enough. But also, are we doing it the most ethical way possible?
Right.
And it's just a conversation worth having, I think.
Yeah.
Well, sort of shifting gears, what would maybe be your favorite place you've been? And maybe that's the favorite pictures you've taken, or maybe those two are different.
Let's see. So I think one of my favorite places I've been, I actually didn't get to do any underwater photography here, but I don't mind giving the location because it's a really big place, but is Silver Spring State Park. And this kind of ties into what we were just talking about. So Silver Springs was like the Disney World before Disney World was here. And it was a ecological disaster. They had brought like monkeys in and like all sorts of like exotic wildlife and let them loose into the forest and around the springs, and opened up the head spring, which it's a first magnitude spring. So it's the largest like flow that a spring can have. It's huge and it's incredibly beautiful. So thankfully the state park service has acquired it, and they've cut off all swimming, but you can kayak on it and paddle out on the river and over the spring head. And it's unbelievably beautiful. I mean, the water visibility is like 100 feet plus.
Wow.
Just crystal clear turquoise waters. There's still a few monkeys. That population, I think, is pretty riddled with disease. They're not, I mean, they shouldn't be there. But you can sometimes see monkeys if you go far down the river. If you're not careful, they'll attack you when you're on the trail. It's a beautiful place. There's a lot of wildlife there. Cormorants and aningas, they're two birds that they'll dive underwater, and you can like look down, see birds that look like they're flying underneath your boat.
Wow,
that's so cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
I haven't done any underwater photography there. It's definitely one of the most beautiful places I've gotten to go to.
Follow-up question to that. Yeah. What are some places you want to go that you haven't been yet? Or that you feel comfortable saying?
Yeah. So
dream list type thing.
So I kind of discovered that there are a good bit of springs in Northwest Florida. So I've kind of been working my way around some of those. But let's see. There's a lot of springs off the Suwannee River, and that's an area that I haven't explored at all yet. I've been to one spring off of that river, Manatee Springs State Park. So there's a ton along there that I'm hoping to explore at some point, but got to get out past Tallahassee, and it's a ways to go from here. So
I know a lot of people who got into like wildlife photography. Like you say, it's kind of like a growing thing. I lived in Alaska for 3 years, and almost everyone who moves up there, like within 3 months, buys a real nice camera, and they just go out in the woods. And look, cool. Alaska does a lot of the work for you. It does not take a lot or a very well trained eye to be able to take a good picture out there, because it's just the wildlife is expansive, and it's just. It's the only place I've ever been where within 45 minutes of being on a road, like a main like highway, you are somewhere where there's a possibility man has never touched. It's crazy out there, but it is funny hearing you talk about you being like a growing thing, because up there, man, everyone thinks I have a budding career in wildlife photography.
Well, and social media probably.
That certainly
Instagram
has
it can give a little false hope, but you gotta really persevere.
Yeah,
it's a long process.
What are some places that people can go to that maybe they hear us talking, and because I'm one of those people that would be listening to this conversation and go, oh man, I never thought I'd want to go check one of those. I never thought that's even an option of stuff to go see. Where people can go or can go responsibly. Maybe there's...
And how should they treat it?
That's a great question. So I think one of my favorite springs that's relatively close to here is Wakulla Springs State Park.
Heard of it.
You can swim at the head spring. They do a pretty good job of kind of balancing that, protecting land, but also allowing people to interact with it. So you can swim at the head spring, and there are a lot of manatees that come up there in the winter. There is a large section of the park, though, that is completely shut off from people. And they do take river tour boats, and they go down the river, or like the spring run. It's essentially a river because it's pretty big. It's a first magnitude spring as well. And like you can see manatees from the boat and a lot of other wildlife. It's really cool. And then if you go outside the park, you can kayak on part of the run as well. But that's a really beautiful place. A small spot that it tends to see a lot of people, but Ponce de Leon is nearby. And it's a small spring, but if you've never seen that kind of clear water before, like that's a good place to start, and it's really beautiful. And that one's kind of been kind of designed so that people can swim in it, which is important because like people need to be able to experience that.
Yeah, get there with it.
So that one is less natural, but still really beautiful.
Okay.
But let's see. There is Vortex Springs, which some people might like, but I have a lot of ecological qualms with that place. I'm hoping that the state park system acquires that at some point, but we'll see.
It's like Class Action Park in Northwest Florida. If you're familiar with the Class Action Park, that is the exact same thing.
So I don't know that I can recommend that one, but it's a big spring, and if you dive, then that's probably a great one to explore. if you're like either really into free diving or scuba diving. But yeah, so there are springs around here, but most of the ones in Northwest Florida are smaller and kind of scattered around. It's really once you get towards like North Florida and like Central Florida, that's where a lot of the larger ones are.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You never gone and visited a spring?
I don't know that I have. I mean, if I have, the closest thing I've come to is Vortex Springs. But
Yeah.
other than that, I mean,
Well, Ponce de Leon's the same exit, I believe.
yeah, I've definitely never been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I have
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. I've done Wakulla. I have been to a state park. You're talking about being on the Swanee River. It was like when I was 14 or 15.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was. And I've done Vortex and I've done Ponce de Leon.
Okay.
I have not really done it since I had children. It was kind of a thing that I did do. Like there were a few times right after Kate and I got married that we would just on a Saturday morning like get up because you got to drive a few hours
Right.
this. But if you're comfortable being in the car for 3 hours, go in
It's
and
a
find
good day trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've definitely done Vortex Springs with some youth or school thing, but I just didn't know what it was, didn't care.
Yeah.
Just hanging out with my friends, like didn't
Yeah.
really take it in properly.
Well, it's like it's like an amateur theme park on water. Like
Yeah.
you're definitely not there to have an appreciation for the environment around.
It's definitely not a spring in its natural state.
you.
Yeah. So okay. Now we're talking about it, and I've definitely been there on some sort of.
They have like a trapeze and
Yeah, I've definitely been there.
a
For that.
Yeah.
man-made water slide. It is
Yeah, definitely.
insurance nightmare.
I've definitely done that.
Oh, but you also asked like what if people do go, like what are things that they can
Yeah.
do?
Yeah,
What did you do
yeah.
for
Some things to consider.
So before I get to that, a good resource is the Florida Springs Institute. They're based out of High Springs, Florida, and they do a lot of springs research and monitoring of the health of springs. Most of it's been in North Florida, but they actually have monitored a few springs in Northwest Florida. I think they're about to expand that program. But they've got a ton of resources, and they're the scientists. They're like front lines, like with spring conservation and research. So if you go to their website, that's a great resource. But yeah, so I think, one thing is just be careful where you're standing. There are some invasive aquatic plants that it doesn't really matter if you stand on those. But if you don't know, like if it's green, like let it be. Like it's like got a lot of challenges facing it. Aside from people being there, because the springs are connected to the Florida aquifer, and that's connected to groundwater, which is influenced by runoff from agriculture and other things. That can influence like the health of the spring as well. So just respect plant life and wildlife. Look, but don't touch, and keep your distance. And I think and an easy one is just like, don't litter. Like I'll go and I've picked out trash from like spring runs, and it's really sad because it's this incredibly beautiful place. And then, there's like a soda can somewhere. And
Yeah, littering is something
I don't understand it.
I don't understand.
And at a neural level, I don't get it.
I don't get it.
On how your brain functions to where you're just okay with throwing trash.
Just throwing it out there. I mean, I can understand stuff that gets blown away or you drop, you don't realize. Like that's gonna be some
There's
level.
far too much of it for that to be the
Exactly.
case.
Yeah, it's way too obvious when it's just like clearly discarded intentionally.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. Before we move on, I did have one more question because just briefly, you said you'd gone out to the Oriskany yesterday or something. Do you do saltwater photography or mostly freshwater?
So I'm working on that. I'm not scuba certified yet. I'm kind of in the process of that. But it's a long way. You can't just get scuba certified and then like start doing the camera stuff down there. It takes a while to get to that point. So I'm kind of working on my diving abilities. I've gotten where I can hold my breath and like control pressure a little bit. But I've got a long way to go before I can really do that. But it's tough in the wintertime because I wear a wetsuit and it's so buoyant. And the camera is also pretty buoyant too. I mean, it's like 25 pounds, but it's got a lot of air inside of it, so it still floats.
So it's like basically a plastic bubble in there.
Yeah, so it can be, it's pretty tough to swim down with that. But yeah, so I'm hoping to like expand to that. And at some point I'm hoping to make it back to the Keys, and do some photography there. Would love to go to Dry Tortugas at some point. But yeah, we'll see when that happens. But
No. So we always ask people 2 questions that we end on. The first one is if you had any constructive criticism. What are some areas that either wildlife photography or just conservation in general do you think need some improvement or some suggestions you have?
Yeah. So I think one is if you visit a place, just think twice before like posting a location if you're sharing a photo of it. There's a tag called like keep the spring state like wild, I believe, for people that if they find a spring and want to show a photo and tag something, they can tag that, but not the actual location. And the location of that specific tag actually takes people to the Springs Institute. And that's kind of the idea
Cool,
of like, hey, we can
Cool.
learn about that. So yeah, just being mindful of that. And not like being like super, because I don't want it to come across as like snooty and like, I'm keeping all these springs myself, but
No, there's a purpose behind it.
yeah, there's a purpose to it. A lot of them can't handle large amounts of people and need to be knowledgeable of that and respectful of that. So, and another thing I think is, I think a lot of the people that visit springs, just from my observations, as I've gone to an awful lot of them, I think sometimes people seem to approach those places as if they're not changing at all, and if they're invincible almost. And I mean, the natural world has obviously proved that it's resilient, but it's not invincible, and we are impacting it. So the spring that you may have grown up visiting as a kid, it's not necessarily going to be the same place. And, maybe if you went with your friends and like kind of had your own little party there, like nowadays that might be amplified and there's tons of people doing that. And when you like kind of put that in perspective of that growing impact, it's just important to be mindful of that, to be extra careful about like, all right, let's make sure we pick up everything we left here. Don't let any trash get into the springs. Let's make sure that when we're swimming around, we're being careful where we put our feet. And following the rules that the state park or whatever organization's like kind of in charge of that spring, like following the legislation there. And I mean, a huge one about that is like for boaters and manatees, like follow no wake zones. Manatees, like, you can look at the numbers on FWC's website. Like there are hundreds that get killed every year. I mean, I've died with like hundreds of manatees, and I see scars on like almost all of their backs. It's really sad. So, I mean, that's like above the water and in the water things you can do. But, and lastly, I think I wish that like, I think this is one way I hope that the world begins to change. I think it is. It's slow, but it's just becoming more ecologically minded. We need to realize that, like, kind of like we said earlier, like our health is directly connected to the world around us. And when one of those things suffers, the rest of the world suffers. And it tends to hit like people at the bottom of the economic scale first.
Absolutely. Yep.
So just to know, like, if I'm dumping these chemicals on the ground, I mean, that's not like an everyday thing that happens, but like that's going to impact something. Like you might just think, oh, it's just one time, one person, but like, it's never one time. It's never one person. It's like everyone, like it gets amplified. And then, I'm reading, Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, and she wrote that book during, the 60s and kind of when DDT was kind of wreaking havoc on everything. And she talks about how like just thinking about groundwater and how it moves. And it's the same, it's moving just like streams and rivers move, like through the soil, but just at a slower pace and sometimes in an unpredictable pace. And that's the thing with the springs is an impact on either like terrestrial habitat or could be runoff entering into the aquifer, like those effects can be like suddenly pop up like years later, like miles away from where that happened. So just knowing that like wildlife, spring health, like water health, and like the land, like, and us, like all of that's connected. And you have a mindset of protecting all of those things so that all of those things can flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I used to do when I was in the military was what we call collateral damage calls. And so if we were like planning an operation in an urban area and someone would want to use certain types of weapons or bring in certain types of aircraft or things like that, and my job would be to be like, listen, I mean, we're talking, this is a city center. We can't be putting trucks of jet fuel lining the street, because if something happens to one of them, their primary water source is ruined. And then instead of taking out 5 bad dudes, you've taken out 50,000 civilians, and not to mention destroyed ecologically everything that's around. I agree with you. I think people are better about it. I think we are getting better and taking into consideration. And I don't know if part of that is like in the late 80s and early 90s, it seemed like every villain, on a TV show or whatever was like a big oil pollutant kind of guy. But it's just, we have to be better and more considerate about, I think the word footprint is such a great describer. Like, think about what you leave behind and how you affect it. And
and like learn to tread lightly on these like precious places.
Yep. The other question is, what's the future hold? What do you think's coming about the next 5 years?
Yeah. So currently focusing on my master's research. There's a chance I actually will, it's not set in stone yet, but I might be doing a project on one of the springs in Northwest Florida as a backup to my original project, which is exciting, and that's something I'd love. So that could be really cool, and it'd be really neat to be able to document that process too with my camera. So that'd be awesome. I have like a few like kind of projects in mind. They're kind of, it's a slow burn, like they'll come to fruition eventually, but one is with like just springs around Florida, and like I'm slowly building a portfolio of images from that. Then another one is focusing on kind of the forgotten impact of roads on wildlife. So like basically images of animals that have been like hit by cars and things like that. So that one, I've got a few images going, but that's been an interesting project, just kind of thinking through.
I just think that is deeply interesting to me personally, because we may cut all this, but sometimes I get obsessed with these thoughts and I just can't like break them. And the thought of automobiles, traffic, roadways, this is such a new thing that just totally disrupted the way. I mean, the roads are old, right? Like there were roads that connected the Roman Empire, but it's not like we came through here and destroyed millions of miles of wildlife.
And like those roads were traversable, and these ones are not.
Yeah. Specifically, I mean, I think about this almost every time I drive on the interstate.
Yeah,
like a system that was developed.
Mind blowing.
I mean, and it just crosses through miles and miles and miles of places where we weren't living, we weren't working, just straight through the wildlife. And I think about the impact that that's had. You know, you're a deer, and you wake up one morning and you go to this, watering hole you always go to, and then suddenly, oh my gosh, there's a road there, and there's these fast zooming things going across it. This totally disrupted everything that lived there prior. Completely blows my mind. And even trains, I'm sure that's the same way. Train, any kind of motion.
And I think like how I don't know. You just think of the end of it, like yourself, and then the number of like dead animals you see just driving around, and like that's one person. Like everyone's seeing that, in different areas. Like the scale of like death is like insane. And I think it's so easy like to like just kind of like for people to like forget about what like desensitized when it's like can you imagine what that like creature endured and like the terror of like being not understanding and then finding yourself.
I think it's something worth documenting, and I appreciate you.
Yeah. And I think so kind of as I was kind of thinking through that, I discovered the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which is another kind of one of my favorite like conservation organizations in Florida. They're actually founded by Carlton Ward, and he's like the best like Florida wildlife photographer. He's documented like Florida panther. He's like Nat Geo. But they're kind of like working to like establish kind of like a green line like through Florida so that there's just like these like because habitat gets so cut up and like isolated, but working to establish like corridors where they can actually travel throughout the whole state, which is super cool.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah. But anyway, getting back to like what the future holds, there's a lot of like kind of things in the works, and I think if people just want to like, right now I'm on Instagram. I think eventually I'm going to have a website soon, but if they just want to follow along there, I'm in this for a long haul. So if you want to see images of wild Florida, like both terrestrial and aquatic, then they can just follow along.
Well, what is your Instagram that they could?
So it's Joseph_Ricketts. And I think my profile photo is of me holding my camera underwater. So it's not too hard to find.
Cool. We normally like do a goodbye thing, but you kind of combine the two, so that's fine with me. I appreciate you hanging out with us, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to Fantastic People. Please rate and subscribe wherever you find your podcast, and follow us on social media. That's at Fantastic People Pod on Facebook, at Fantastic_People Pod on Instagram, and at Fantastic People, no E, on Twitter. We'd like to say thank you to Alex Edmondson for our artwork, and we hope to see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.